41 goals. That is what Kylian Mbappe gave Real Madrid this season. 41 times, he found the back of the net, carrying the weight of the badge, and justifying the astronomical wages. But when Arbeloa sat in front of the press after the darkest night of their season, he didn't talk about the goals. He didn't talk about the sheer individual brilliance. He talked about what happens when the goals are no longer enough. I have watched this club for years now. We have seen Galacticos come and go. We have seen legendary managers fired just months after winning the Champions League. And dressing rooms absolutely implode under the sheer, crushing weight of expectations at the Santiago Bernabeu. But what happened on that Tuesday night against Barcelona? Man, it's been eating at me. Let's rewind for a second. The final whistle blows. A devastating 2-0 defeat to your fiercest rivals. It's not just a loss on the scoreline. It's a death sentence for the campaign. A trophyless season here is not merely a disappointment. It is an institutional crisis. The stadium empties out, silent and freezing cold. Down in the dressing room, the atmosphere is suffocating. You can imagine it, right? The heavy silence, the boots hitting the floor, the horrific realization that this multi-million-dollar project, this Galacticos 3 era, has crashed before it even took off. And right at the center of this storm, or rather, glaringly absent from it, is the 4-1 goal man, Kylian Mbappe, sidelined with a hamstring issue. Now, every channel, every pundit, and every tactical blog is talking about how Real Madrid's midfield collapsed without him. They analyze the XG, drawing complex pass maps to show how attacking sequences broke down because there was no outlet to stretch Barcelona's high line. They blame the medical staff. They blame the congested fixture list. But that is not the story here. The real story isn't about the tactical hole he left on the pitch. It's about the massive, gaping void of leadership he left in the dressing room. And the moment that void was officially exposed wasn't on the grass, it was in the press room, directly from the mouth of the manager, who was watching his own career at Madrid slip through his fingers. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. When a season ends in complete failure for Real Madrid, blood has to be spilled. Someone has to take the fall. Usually, it's the manager. Álvaro Arbeloa knows the ruthless history of the club he serves. He knows Florentino Perez's finger is already hovering over the trigger. In these moments of absolute desperation, a manager looks to his marquee player, his superstar, to stand up, face the hostile media, or at least show unyielding solidarity. You expect the leader to drag his injured leg to the touchline, to suffer with the team. Think back to the Zidane era. Think about Cristiano Ronaldo playing through tendinitis, or Sergio Ramos demanding painkilling injections just to be on the pitch for a seemingly meaningless cup tie. That was the identity. That was the unwritten rule of the Bernabeu dressing room. You give your body to the club. But now we are looking at a sterile, calculated environment where numbers are phenomenal, but the soul is missing. This is the anxiety that is creeping into every corner of the fan base. Are we just a platform for individual brands now? Can a manager even demand sacrifice from a player whose personal gravity rivals the institution itself? Instead of solidarity, we got silence from the Mbappe camp, a profound, deafening silence. And then, we got Arbeloa's press conference. We will get into the exact words Arbeloa used in a minute, because they are chilling. A hamstring injury is a medical fact, but how a player handles that injury when the team is bleeding out on the pitch is a cultural choice. Mbappe gave them 41 goals. But at a club that views itself as footballing royalty, 41 goals are a baseline. It is a contractual obligation. What makes you a legend in that white shirt is what you do when the system fails, when the tactics fall apart, and when the season turns to ashes. Nobody is talking about the subtle shift in power that occurred the second the final whistle blew against Barcelona. The power shifted from the collective survival of the squad to the individual preservation of the star. The 3 remaining games of this season, meaningless fixtures on paper, have suddenly become the most important psychological test of Kylian Mbappe's career in Spain. They are no longer about winning points. They are about proving allegiance. To understand the sheer magnitude of what happened next, you have to look at the exact phrasing used in that post-match press conference. The room was suffocating. The Spanish press, notorious for smelling blood in the water, bypassed the tactical breakdowns of the 2-0 defeat and aimed straight for the elephant in the room. A reporter asked Álvaro Arbeloa about his missing talisman. The question was simple. Would Kylian Mbappe pushed through the pain barrier to be available for the final 3 matches of the campaign? Arbeloa leaned into the microphone, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and utter resignation. Will Kylian do more to recover and play? Well, I really don't know anymore, Arbeloa stated, his voice devoid of the usual protective managerial armor. The current season only lasts about 2 more weeks, depending on how his discomfort and pain progress. We will wait and see if he has the fitness to compete. When the manager of Real Madrid sits in front of the global media and publicly declares "I don't know" regarding the commitment of his highest-paid player, it is an unprecedented admission of surrendered authority. Arbeloa did not say the medical staff definitively ruled him out. He did not say the injury was too severe to risk. He explicitly framed the situation around the player's own progression and willingness to push himself. He placed the burden of the decision squarely onto the shoulders of a player who was entirely absent from the battlefield. This brings us to the core tension of this entire saga. There are 3 games left in the La Liga calendar. Mathematically, they are entirely meaningless. The title is gone. The Champions League is a distant memory. For a pragmatic, modern athlete whose physical well-being is tied to $100 million endorsements and future Ballon d'Or campaigns, risking a fragile hamstring in a dead rubber match is an absurd proposition. It is a terrible business decision. But Real Madrid is not a standard business. It is a club built on the mythology of sacrifice. The underlying syllogism here is what makes the dynamic so incredibly toxic. Arbeloa, a man who bleeds the white of Madrid, is staring down the barrel of a humiliating sacking. He needs his players to show defiance, to fight for the pride of the badge in these final 3 games, simply to prove to Florentino Perez that the dressing room has not entirely given up. He needs a blood sacrifice. Mbappe, on the other hand, recognizes that his 41 goals this season have already fulfilled his end of the bargain. He is calculating that his body is more valuable than Arbeloa's doomed tenure. Nobody is talking about the terrifying reality that Arbeloa's quote exposed. He was indirectly asking a question to the board, not the press. He was asking, how can I manage a squad when the central pillar of the project decides that his season is over the moment the trophies are out of reach? The manager was desperately trying to use the media to publicly shame his superstar into playing, precisely because he no longer has the internal power to demand it behind closed doors. In any normal footballing institution, a manager calling out a player's commitment would lead to disciplinary action against the player. At the Santiago Bernabeu, it usually accelerates the manager's exit. Arbeloa knows this. His words were a calculated gamble, a final, desperate throw of the dice to regain control of a narrative that is rapidly slipping away. He is forcing the hierarchy to look at the situation and make a choice. Is the failure of this project a result of poor tactical management? Or is it the inevitable consequence of building a team around a superstar whose personal preservation supersedes the collective identity of the club? This is the moment the illusion shattered. The hamstring injury might be completely legitimate. The pain might be real. But in the ruthless theater of Real Madrid, the truth of the injury matters far less than the optics of the suffering. And right now, the manager is suffering alone. This is where we have to look away from the manager's press conference and turn our attention to the inner sanctum of Valdebebas. If you read the subsequent reports from The Athletic and Marca in the days following the El Clasico disaster, a terrifyingly consistent narrative began to emerge. It wasn't about shouting matches in the dressing room. It wasn't about a spectacular falling out over tactical systems or training ground bust-ups. It was about something much more insidious. It was about absolute, chilling silence. According to the insiders closest to the Madrid camp, the secret revelation lies in the medical room. Let us be very clear. Kylian Mbappe's hamstring injury is not a fabrication. The medical scans are real. The physical discomfort is documented. And the club's medical staff has the empirical data to prove it. But what the Tier 1 journalists are quietly pointing out is the profound physical and emotional isolation of the superstar during the club's darkest hour. While the rest of the squad was forced to stand in front of the raging Bernabeu crowd, absorbing the vitriol of a trophyless season and facing the harsh reality of their failure, the 4-1 goal man was entirely separated. He was insulated by his own entourage, protected by his undeniable statistical supremacy, and completely detached from the collective trauma of the team. That is not just a player undergoing rehabilitation. That is a sovereign entity operating within a football club. Nobody is talking about the psychological impact this has on the rest of the squad. Imagine being a young midfielder, completely overrun by Barcelona's press, exhausted to your absolute physical limits, and you look over to the sidelines, and your undisputed leader is simply not there. He is not limping on the touchline to shout instructions. He is not waiting in the tunnel to embrace the broken, defeated players walking off the pitch. The silence from Mbappe's camp after the defeat was absolutely deafening. There was no rallying cry on social media, no public backing of the beleaguered manager. Just a total, calculated media blackout. This is the brutal reality of the modern Galactico era, and it forces us to completely reevaluate the weight of those 41 goals. We are programmed as fans to look at a striker who scores 41 times in a single season and automatically label him a savior, an unqualified success, and the absolute cornerstone of the franchise. But what happens when those goals are essentially hollow? What happens when a player performs with the ruthless, mechanical efficiency of a perfect mercenary, rather than the burning, desperate passion of a true club legend? He gave them exactly what was written in the contract. He delivered the staggering offensive output that Florentino Perez paid hundreds of millions of euros for. But he did not give them his soul. When the tactical system completely collapsed against Barcelona, and when Álvaro Arbeloa desperately needed a unified front to survive the impending political fallout, Mbappe's decision to retreat into the shadows of the medical room was the final, fatal blow to the manager's authority. He proved that he is bigger than the crisis. He proved that he can score his goals, secure his individual accolades, and let the rest of the institution burn around him without getting his hands dirty. Arbeloa's desperate, "I don't know" wasn't just a comment on a hamstring. It was the agonizing realization that he is managing a player who is fundamentally untouchable, a player who views Real Madrid as a magnificent stage for his own brilliance, rather than a cause worth bleeding for when the lights finally go out. Now, there is a completely valid counter-argument to all of this. If we step back from the raw emotion of a 2-0 defeat to Barcelona, the generous reading of this situation is simple. The man is completely, fundamentally exhausted. Look at the data from this season. Look at the heat maps, the sprints into the final third, the sheer offensive burden placed on his shoulders. Kylian Mbappe has carried this Real Madrid attack for 9 grueling months. He has navigated a congested fixture list that is systematically breaking down elite athletes across Europe. His hamstring did not just magically give out. It was ground down into dust by the demands of the modern game. Expecting him to risk a severe, long-term muscle tear for 3 mathematically meaningless matches is not just unfair, it borders on professional negligence. From Mbappe's perspective, or rather, from his medical and advisory team's perspective, Arbeloa's press conference was a betrayal. You do not publicly question the pain threshold of your top scorer. You protect him. But Arbeloa didn't protect him. And that brings us to the less generous reading of the manager's actions. Álvaro Arbeloa is not stupid. He knows the political machinery of Real Madrid better than almost anyone. He knows that when Florentino Perez watches Barcelona celebrate at the Bernabeu, the executioner's axe is already being sharpened. Arbeloa is fighting for his managerial life. And when a manager is backed into a corner, self-preservation kicks in. By uttering those words, "I really don't know anymore," Arbeloa successfully changed the entire media narrative. Think about it. Before he sat down in that press room, the front pages were ready to tear apart his tactical naivety. They were ready to scrutinize his substitutions, his defensive structure, and his inability to motivate the squad. But the second he threw the Mbappe situation into the public domain, he redirected the crosshairs. He shifted the blame from the dugout to the medical room. He framed the failure of the season not as a collapse of his own tactical system, but as a lack of commitment from the modern superstar. It is a desperate, highly cynical gamble. So, who is right? Is it the burned-out superstar protecting his multi-million-dollar body from a meaningless sacrifice? Or is it the desperate manager demanding one last show of loyalty to a shattered institution? The truth is, they are both right, and they are both fundamentally wrong. That is the tragedy of this current Real Madrid era. The disconnect between the bench and the pitch is now absolute. They are speaking 2 entirely different languages. Mbappe speaks the language of individual optimization, load management, and statistical dominance. Arbeloa is trying to speak the ancient language of Madridismo, of blood, sweat, and unquestioning sacrifice. And those two languages can no longer coexist in the same dressing room. So, where does this leave us? Where does Real Madrid go from here? After the dust settles on a bitterly disappointing, trophyless season and the heavy silence from the medical room finally breaks, we are heading into a summer of absolute, unmitigated chaos at the Santiago Bernabeu. Florentino Perez is now standing at a massive crossroads regarding this entire Galacticos 3 project. And he has a very clear, very brutal decision to make. Does he take the easy route, fire Álvaro Arbeloa for failing to win La Liga and for daring to publicly question the untouchable crown jewel of the empire? Or does he look at the fundamental cultural rot creeping into the Valdebebas dressing room and realize that you cannot build a lasting dynasty on a foundation of pure, unattached individualism? History tells us Perez will almost certainly choose the superstar over the manager. Managers are completely expendable at Madrid. Superstars who score 41 goals are financial and marketing assets you protect at all costs. But firing Arbeloa does not fix the underlying issue. It just kicks the can down the road for the next manager who walks through those doors. The next guy is going to have to look around that dressing room and figure out how to demand blood, sweat, and absolute loyalty from a group of young, impressionable players who just watched their main man opt out when the going got tough. That is not a tactical problem. That is a deeply ingrained cultural crisis. So tell me in the comments what you actually think. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this dressing room divide. Is Arbeloa completely out of line for throwing his injured superstar under the bus just to save his own job? Or is Kylian Mbappe showing exactly why raw, incredible statistics do not automatically make you a true Madrid legend? There are two very clear sides to this argument, and both of them spell serious trouble for the club going forward. Come back to this video when the summer transfer window officially opens and the preseason begins, because I guarantee you, the subtle power struggle we just witnessed in that press room is going to dictate every single move Real Madrid makes next. The manager might change, but the ego at the center of the project remains. If this kind of deep, behind-the-scenes analysis of the beautiful game is what you come here for, hit subscribe. We don't just look at the scorelines here. We look at the people pulling the strings. I'll see you in the next one.